Welcome to Listening to the Trees Class 2. This is Wednesday, July 13th, and I am Raven Dana, and this site is called Walking Between the Worlds. If you haven't tuned into the class before, Class 1 is up online as well. Today, in our exploration about trees, we're going to come to that place where we begin to mingle science and not just myth, but magic and wonder and awe and some of the synchronicities that occur around people who, when they're involved with nature, are given a helping hand by nature herself. So we're going to take a look at the book To Speak for the Trees. The author is Diana Beresford Kroger, and her story begins in Ireland, where she was orphaned at an early age. Her parents were killed in a car crash. And she was then sent to live with her Uncle Pat, and she was terrified of being sent to what's called the laundry, which is a place where kids went, largely girls were sent, especially if they were unmarried mothers or prostitutes, but also orphans were sent to the laundry. And she was so grateful that she was able to live with her uncle, even though he was not particularly good at knowing what she needed, at least at first. They worked it out. They figured out how to get along and how to support each other as time went by, but at the beginning it was tough on her. She did, however, have a large body of people, relatives and those who were very familiar with the ancient ways, and she was taken in as a ward. And every summer she would go to a place called the Valley of the Lachines, and I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but the Valley of Lachines. The Lachines is the home or the place of the Fae, or the people between the worlds, right? The Fae, fairies, gnomes, elves. She was taught the old ways by a number of men and women who took her under wing and began by teaching her all the associations with plants and then the trees. And then so she learned firsthand by being taken into the woods and being told stories about different plants and their usefulness, their relationship to trees, the importance of the trees. There were very few trees, by the way, in Ireland. It used to be covered with deciduous forests until the English came and took over the land, cut down their forests, raised their sacred groves, and also prevented them, told them that they could not replant. Diana discovered that she had this intense love of plants and discovering why these things that she was being taught worked. So, for example, on Beltane, she was allowed to go to, she usually only went to the valley in the summertime, but she was allowed to go on Beltane, which is May 1st. And she was taken out into the woods by a group of women waiting for the sun to rise. There was a stone altar there, and they were waiting for the sun to rise. And just as the sun first came up and the dew was all over the shamrocks, she was told to gather the dew and put it on her face, because this was a beauty treatment that on this day for women that the women gathered to do for themselves. Well, she was so intrigued. Eventually, of course, this is another story where her upbringing triggered this desire to know. And when she grew and became proficient in the sciences, she did actually discover that the shamrocks produce a very particular chemical, a biochemical, which was held in solution by the morning dew, and that when applied to the face, it was able to slightly tighten the skin, but also to improve circulation. So again, she made a whole life for herself in taking these things that she learned and showing scientifically that what she was taught was utterly true, and she did, and it's quite remarkable. with that in mind, there was a stone that she went to when she was sad, her weeping stone, and she'd sit behind it and hide. And in her in her exploration with these people who were teaching her the ancient ways, she discovered that her weeping stone was an Ogham stone. Excuse me. In other words, the stone had writing on it. The stone had writing on it in an ancient Celtic script called the Ogham script. And it's an ancient alphabet of 20 letters, each letter named for a tree or a companion plant to a tree. It is the second oldest language in the Western world, and it is in fact the language that the discovery, the creation of this language was said to come from a person named Ogham, right? And he received this information from nature herself, from experiences of being in the sunlight and feeling the resonance or the life force, the dance of the sun on the plants and on the trees. And that's where he got his information from, out of which he created this marvelous alphabet, which at first the alphabet, the letters were put on stones. You can almost think of it like an ancient newsletter, right? That different stones would have information on them carved into them. And the script, we're going to explore more with the script and some of the trees and plants that are involved in the process a little bit later in the class today. In any case, when she discovered that her weeping stone was an Ogham stone, it was also a revelation and a turning point. Druids knew that the trees were sentient, and they believed that they were more able to be felt after a rain or at night, right? People who were more attuned experienced their sentience, their being, their presence, as a felt sound or a vibration in the upper chest. We now know, of course, that large trees do produce infrasound, and it's just at or below the range of human hearing. So it's really remarkable how many of these things actually are based in science. And again, for me, a part of the thrill of reading this information is to constantly go back and ask the question, well, I'm happy that science proves these things are real. And how did they discover them in the first place? And again, the answer is not by trial and error. The answer is that we have the capacity to have this deep communication with plants, with the rest of our kin. We are part and parcel of the natural world. And so to be able to sit with a plant or sit with a tree and become aware of the active properties, not in a scientific way, but in a knowing way, because that's what our ancestors did. Not that there wasn't some trial and error, I'm sure there was. And yet at the same time, when people are spoken to about these, what we would call in modern times old wives' tales before they're proven, right? And then there's science. That they say that they got the information directly, either from the plants or from the spirits of plants, or the dryads of the trees, right? The spirits of the trees. So it's pretty remarkable. Now, at age 16, her wardship ended, and her many teachers gathered for a celebration, during which time a woman named Mary Cronin came and prophesied for her. She told Diana her future. She told her many, many things that came true about her career and her love of trees and the influence she would have in the world by being a voice for the trees. And she also told her where she would live, that she would work with the indigenous people. She told her about the man she would marry. In any case, I'm sharing this because there's so many interesting synchronicities when it comes to stories like this. In any event, the thing she was told came true. She, as she ventured out and began to make a career out of her love of trees and forestry, she created a documentary called Call of the Forest, The Forgotten Wisdom of Trees, which you can find, and which the link to which I put in your in the class notes. Diana says this, and I love this. Trees have the neural ability to listen and to think. They have all the parts necessary for consciousness and mind. That is what I proved, that the forests think, communicate, and perhaps even dream. This knowledge was new to science. These connections were not recognized then, but they are now fully beginning to be acknowledged. So that is and continues to be her contribution. She has made numerous important discoveries. For example, why trees are valuable to marine life. It is because, particularly the mother trees in deciduous forests, when their leaves decay, they release fulvic acid into the soil, which then gets washed into the rivers and gets washed into the waterways between freshwater and seawater. That the fulvic acid increases, it bonds and it increases the oxygen. It bonds with iron and increases the oxygen. And so when that fulvic acid and its oxygen hits the waterways, the plankton, the phytoplankton, radically increase. They grow, they're happy campers, and that feeds a wide variety of marine life, some of which is special to that place where the sea and the freshwater come together. So it feeds the rare species, and it creates literally a buffet for the phytoplankton. So some of these connections, how do trees impact other things? How do trees impact the weather? How do trees impact this ocean life? It's remarkable. And what she talks a lot about is noticing and observing. That, of course, it is the beginning of the scientific process to notice and observe. But without really deep observation, we miss those connections. We don't see the value. We don't understand how the trees make a certain kind of contribution or how they do what they do, right? Now, Diana and her husband, they have a tree farm in Canada. When she got tired of, basically, she talks about getting sick of the misogyny in the scientific community, because as a woman, she had a whole lot of problems. We'll just leave the conversation right there. But what she did when they bought this farm in Canada was she began to travel the world and looking for rare trees and species that were dying out. And she has created a bank of genetic material. She especially looks for species of trees that will survive the warming climate, which is important, right? So two of the trees that are particularly good at surviving the warming climate are hickories and oak. She locates rare trees and repopulates areas that have been clear-cut and decimated. Now, she collaborates with indigenous people, and she helps to restore the medicine trees to the area of, especially where she lives right now in Canada. For example, the First Nation people told the settlers of an area not to cut a particular species of ash, the patella, P-T-E-L-A, the patella. Now, of course, the settlers cut them to near extinction. We know that the ash tree, this particular ash tree, has synergistic biochemical properties. Its use includes revving up our internal organs and cranking up our metabolism in a good way. It makes medicines more effective in our bodies at a much lower dose. All right. So chemotherapy, when used with patella drugs, can be substantially reduced. Now, it took her 25 years to find another one of these trees. 25 years. There was one lone tree left in the area. And after an exhaustive search, based on looking at climate and types of soil, she finally got a lead, and the lead was from a woman in New Mexico who owned this property and had hillsides and mountains and the right soil and the right climate. And so she went and spent 4 days literally hanging out of a helicopter in a harness with binoculars, looking for, hoping to find one of these very particular kinds of ash trees. And so here's the synchronicity, here's the story. On her fourth and last day, they went out early in the morning, and there was a tremendous amount of dew. And this particular tree was catching the light in such a way that you could see it was all lit up. It's like there was a beacon on this tree. And she recognized it. She realized that was the patella tree. And when she got to the ground and, rejoiced and found it and threw her arms around it and again, did what she does, which was to find a way to repopulate, to at least take a sample, to get a tree, to, anyway, she did what she does. But the thing about it that I really want you to get is, when she went and found the person whose property it was, and they went back to find that tree, it was indistinguishable from the other trees. It was invisible in the forest. That if she had not been hanging out of a helicopter at dawn, where the tree was lit up from the way the light was reflecting off the dew, she wouldn't have found it. So again, these interesting synchronicities that occur. Here's another connection. She observed on her property a willow tree, and she observed sapsuckers, which is a woodpecker, putting holes in the tree. And at first she thought, maybe I should do something, maybe that's, maybe I should stop the bird. But she just observed, and she noticed that after the sapsuckers did what they did, that a host of butterflies would come, and the butterflies would then dine on the leftover sap. And she discovered that the butterflies actually need the micronutrients in that sap. There are certain chemicals that give them color to their wings. She also discovered that in those holes left behind, in those holes, a particular species of wasp would nest. And that species of wasp is critically important because it kills pathogens. And so it's very valuable to have those wasps there. So again, without her observation, the puzzle pieces wouldn't come together, right? Somebody seeing this might go in and chase away the birds or kill the wasps, or right, without knowing how everything works together. So this is part of the amazing thing about trees is that 30 million years ago, trees, by their nature, changed the toxic carbon-loaded environment in such a way that it became possible and then sustainable for other types of life, including mammals. So if they did that 30 million years ago, they can do it again. One of the things I like the most about this author is the message of hope that she brings in the face of climate change. If every person, she says, planted one tree for 6 years, one tree a year for 6 years, if every person on the planet planted one tree a year for 6 years, then it would stop climate change in its tracks. Now, we're not going to get every person on the planet to do that, but there are certainly people who are planting far more than 6 trees a year. So the message here is that if the trees could change the climate of the planet 30 million years ago, they can do it again. They can do it again. And one of the things that she does is, again, ask people to see in your area, what kind of trees do you have? Can you plant a few trees? Can you plant one tree a year? And I think we can. So again, hickory and oak are the top species for carbon sequestering. So they're the top species for halting and reversing climate change. Let's talk about the oak for a minute. The oak is sacred in the Celtic world. It's sacred to many people and to many indigenous people. There's the acorn, has to find a special place to land. There are lots of acorns and, not as many trees as acorns. But when a tree finally grows, when we get an oak tree, there is an entire community that arrives around that oak tree that creates and generates virgin forest. in the tree, the birds that come, they have oil on their feathers that is a precursor of vitamin D. And when they sit in the sunlight and they preen, they get that vitamin D. It also makes their eggs more viable. And they drop seeds. So the seeds that come out of their feathers and are stuck to their feet and in their excrement falls around the base of the tree. And largely what grows then are companion plants that the tree communicates with, helps, feeds nutrients to. The plants help the soil. So they create a relationship. Each species of tree also supports about 40 different kinds of insects. So trees are our allies, and they create communities of living creatures around them. In the 300 years that it takes an oak tree to fully mature, it actually creates a patch of virgin forest. Embedded in the DNA of a tree is the ability to create specific conditions, atmospheric conditions, soil conditions, that are needed to give rise to a host of species and plants, birds, mammals, and humans included. And that's some pretty high magic. That's pretty incredible. One thing about finding mother trees, she talks about mother trees also, is that they're surrounded by healthy environments. They're very old trees, high in wisdom. When they find a mother, she finds a mother tree and she says, well, typically will have lichen growing on the bark. There's diverse plants and bulbs. There's all kinds of species of different kinds of plants and such growing around it. And it has an otherworldly, she said it's an otherworldly atmosphere around that mother tree, around that hub of communication. I'm sorry, I have something. All right. So the ancient tree is a hub of life and wisdom, and it passes nutrients and information to the other trees, as well as to the plants in its understory. And it's pretty remarkable what it can do, because it can selectively send nutrients to different kinds of plants. It can also produce different kinds of chemicals that go through the forest and attract some animals and some birds that will help to keep insects that would harm the trees and the plants, the population down. And it also produces vital chemicals that keep some of those insects away. All right, it's pretty remarkable. So I'm going to give you the practice for this week before we continue. To practice this week, I want you to practice being a tree. And this is a little practice called Greet the Sun. So go outside either first thing in the morning or after a rain when the sun first comes back out, and stand facing the sun. Spread your arms. Just feel the sun on your skin. And note, I want you to just have in the back of your mind that the feeling that you're having in the sun is actually the shortwave dance of the sun's energy interfacing with your skin. That dance has a name in the ancient Celtic world. It's called the Song of the Universe, or the Ciolta na Cuinen. I can't speak Gaelic, so I'm sorry to all of you who know what know what it should say. Now, the sensation is real. So when you stand there and you feel the sun on your skin like a tree, this is the song that Ogham heard, which stitched together the story of the alphabet that he wrote. Now feel that dance of sun. Feel what the trees feel when they're reaching up. Let your body be that strong trunk. Let your roots sink deep into the ground. And now just feel, what kind of tree are you? Repeat the exercise a few times this week and see if when you do it, you're still the same tree every time, or if that changes for you. I'm interested. Let me know what happens. This is a very interesting place to play. It's a good practice. All right. We're going to talk a bit about the alphabet of the trees. So this is the first alphabet of Europe, and with every letter, again, for a tree or a companion plant to the trees. According to the ancient Celts, the Song of the Universe provided the script to the young man called Ogham. This alphabet birthed the literacy of Ireland, and some common words that we use today, like car and hospital, actually came from this ancient language. With Ogham script, the Celts created the second oldest language in the Western world. So we're going to explore two of the trees today. The letter A, which is for A-I-L-M, ailm, is the pine tree. So imagine being in the pine forest and the scent of the pine trees and the feeling of the pine needles beneath your feet. Just think about that for a moment. The Scots pine, or the Pinus sylvestris, has soft antiseptic wood and was used in almost every Celtic kitchen to keep rancidity away from things like butter and milk. Pine groves were used as visual markers for the landscape. They were used for navigation along the shoreline, and people recognized certain groves and knew where they were headed, right? Druidic physicians prescribed walking in pine forests to aid in breathing. Now, of course, we know today that pine needles release an aerosol compound called pinene, right? That makes sense, pinene, and which is very easily absorbed both by the skin and by the surface of the lungs. Clinical trials have shown that pinene boosts the immune system and that the benefits will last about a month, about 28 days, that the immune system will still recognize the effect of the pinene. It is uplifting, it is mood enhancing, it is immune boosting, and it is lung cleansing. Pine is also antimicrobial and can aid in the healing of wounds. So we're looking today, at that place where we're crossing over, looking at trees, not just in the forest, but the trees as far as all these deep, rich medicinal qualities that, and of course, we know the feel good. We know how we feel when we smell a pine tree in the woods or in or pine boughs in our homes. Okay. And the symbol for the pine tree is two straight lines like this, one crossing the other, like an equal armed cross. There, an equal armed cross. Okay. The second tree, which is the birch tree, or the second letter, which is a single line with a line coming out like this, is the letter B. In the Celtic world, the birch was known as the lady tree, and it was held in very high regard. The glistening white bark on the tree actually glows silver in the moonlight, and giving the tree its ancient name, which translated is the glittering tree or glittering girl, gleaming girl. So the seafaring nations made extensive use of the birch, birch canoes, all of the fast-sailing small vessels from the Pacific Northwest, from the north, are essentially come from the birch tree. And you can see that in many, many different cultures, that birch was highly used as a material for sailing vessels. The seafaring nations loved the use of the birch tree for that. Now, Druid physicians also made it to saying a tea by pouring boiling water on the mature leaves to treat urinary tract infections. Now, this tea is still used by many indigenous people. Modern uses of the birch also include aspirin for the relief of, right? So what do we know about birch trees? That, well, they can relieve fever, pain, and inflammation, and reduce blood clotting, right? So that's another thing. Think about aspirin. That's what it does, and that's where it comes from, a birch tree. Birch is also very well known for relieving the pain of arthritis and rheumatism, so it can be made into a salve. Birch produces a phytochemical called butylinic acid, which induces melanoma cells to commit suicide. So think about that. The birch tree produces something that makes certain kinds of cancer cells self-destroy. It's marvelous, incredible. It also contains a sugar, xylitol, that inhibits the bacterium that causes tooth decay. All right, so this is incredible. We don't think about these things. The next time you see the birch tree, which are also called the eyes of the forest because of their markings looking like eyes on the trunks of the tree, they're looking back. So you might, thank a birch once in a while. If you see a birch tree and you think about aspirin and inhibiting the bacteria that makes teeth decay, and the phytochemical which induces melanoma to commit suicide, right? These are incredible things. So pine trees and birch trees, letter A, letter B in this incredible alphabet. So I'm also going to invite you just to do your own little bit of exploration this week. Take a deeper look at birch trees and at pine trees and see if you can find some in your environment. So it'd be a wonderful thing to do. All right, we are coming to the end of class, so let's do our meditation now. And please let me know, I'm going to just ask you this question, if you would like me to put the meditation on a separate video so you can just listen to it by itself, I will be happy to do that from now on. But since we're here now today and coming to the end of class, I'm just going to do our meditation. But I'm happy to do it the other way if you prefer. Please let me know. Okay, get comfortable. Take a few very slow, very deep breaths. And as you breathe, allow yourself to float on the sensation of your breath. Relax. Allow your eyes to close. And find that place where in-breath turns and becomes out-breath. And you drift down, relaxing onto the surface beneath you. And then out-breath turns and becomes in-breath. And you rise up on the inhale, rising up and drifting down. You allow yourself to float on the sensations of breathing. Relax. Soften your jaw. Release your shoulders. Let your belly relax. As your body softens, your mind becomes quiet. And in that space between thoughts, images begin to rise. And you find yourself walking among incredibly tall pine trees. They're towering above you. Beneath your feet is the soft mat of fallen needles. You can hear birds singing high in the canopy. The light, pools of light and shadow, dramatic and beautiful as you walk. And as you walk into a patch of sunlight, you suddenly are almost overcome with the beautiful aroma of the pine trees. It's so intense all of a sudden. And you breathe it in. You can almost feel it washing over your skin. And you smile and walk on. You enjoy walking through the patches of light and shadow between the trees. And you come to a stream. You can hear the stream singing. And you take off your shoes and sit down on a flat stone and turn so you can drop your feet into the cool, clear water. It's chilly but delightful. And as you look out across the stream, You can see the trees dancing in the breeze. And this place is just perfect. You lie down on that flat stone now, pulling your feet up out of the stream, and just gaze up into the sky. And you feel in your body that sensation of being at home, of being at ease. The feeling that you have sometimes when you're with a good friend, a feeling of comfort. And in that moment you can sense, you can feel the different personalities of the trees. You can sense the way they're talking to each other, as if they're whispering underground, as if they're very, very busy, but in a way that's calm and soothing, powerful. And you rest on that stone, surrounded by the whispering trees, and you close your eyes and begin slowly to breathe your way back into the moment, into your body, into the room in which you rest. Breath by breath, you gently call yourself back until you again can feel the sensation of clothing on your skin and the rise of your inhale and the downdrift of your exhale. Come all the way back, feeling refreshed and alert, and allow your eyes to open. Thank you for being with me in class today. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to explore more about this alphabet and some of her trees, some of these trees next week, and do a little more of a deep dive into that spacious place between science and myth. So, and if you're wondering what that is coming out of the back of my head, yeah, there it is. It's it's space. So, space, the final frontier. Okay. Well, I hope you have a lovely day. You know where to find me if you have any questions or comments. And again, thank you so much for sharing this time with me. May the trees be with you. Bye now.